A massive fraud case is now colliding with politics, immigration enforcement, and public trust. The court wins didn't end the conflict. This is only the beginning.
5:47 a.m. St. Paul, Minnesota. Federal agents converged on 12 residential properties across the Twin Cities metro area. What began as a routine investigation into pandemic fraud had evolved into something far more complex. Over $250 million stolen from federal child nutrition programs. 47 individuals indicted. Multiple trials completed with convictions. But the story was far from over. New details emerging in 2024 would reveal jury tampering, violent confrontations with federal officers, and a political environment that enabled one of the most brazen fraud schemes in modern American history. The money intended to feed hungry children had vanished into an international network of shell companies and offshore accounts. And when justice finally arrived, the response would expose deep fractures in how America confronts corruption within immigrant communities. Let me show you what really happened when accountability met resistance. Hit like so this story reaches more people who need to understand the full scope of the scandal. Feeding Our Future. The name suggested charity and compassion. The reality was calculated theft on an unprecedented scale. Founded in 2016, the nonprofit positioned itself as a sponsor organization for the federal child nutrition program, designed to reimburse entities providing meals to low-income children. Executive Director Amy Bach promoted the organization as a lifeline for underserved communities, particularly Somali immigrant populations in Minneapolis and St. Paul. But behind the mission statements and community outreach, something darker was evolving. Between 2020 and 2022, as the pandemic disrupted oversight mechanisms and accelerated funding disbursements, Feeding Our Future submitted reimbursement claims totaling over $240 million. The scale was staggering. For context, established organizations serving tens of thousands of children statewide received a fraction of that amount. The Minnesota Department of Education noticed anomalies immediately. Sites claiming to serve 2,000 hot meals daily from residential kitchens with no commercial equipment. Reimbursement requests for breakfasts served at 2:30 a.m., identical handwriting across invoices from supposedly independent vendors. Locations that had been closed for months still reporting active meal service. When state officials attempted to suspend payments pending investigation, Feeding Our Future responded with a federal lawsuit. They claimed discrimination. Alleged that Minnesota was targeting Somali-led organizations based on ethnicity rather than legitimate compliance concerns. The strategy was deliberate. By weaponizing identity politics, the organization created political pressure that paralyzed oversight. A federal judge ordered payments to resume during litigation. Governor Tim Walz's administration, already under intense scrutiny for pandemic response failures, chose not to escalate the legal battle. Political calculations overtook fiduciary responsibility. The fraud accelerated. Between mid-2021 and early 2022, millions flowed weekly into accounts controlled by Feeding Our Future and its network of sponsored sites. Bank records would later show the money moved with remarkable speed. Deposits cleared in the morning. By afternoon, hundreds of thousands withdrawn as cash or wired to accounts in Kenya, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates. This was not confusion about program rules. It was systematic looting. Comment exposed if you believe the full truth needs to come out. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division received the referral from Minnesota officials in late 2021. Special Agent Matthew Huff led the expanding investigation. What started as suspected false claims quickly revealed an intricate criminal network. Federal investigators subpoenaed bank records for Feeding Our Future and over 60 associated entities. The financial trails were damning. Shell companies created solely to receive and transfer funds. Identical corporate officers listed across dozens of supposedly independent organizations. Wire transfers to foreign accounts within hours of receiving federal reimbursements. And personal enrichment on a massive scale. Amy Bach's personal accounts showed over $2 million in deposits during the fraud period. She purchased a lakefront home valued at $1.2 million. Luxury vehicles. Jewelry. All funded by money meant for children's meals. Surveillance operations documented the scope. Agents watched as individuals affiliated with sponsored feeding sites withdrew cash in amounts ranging from $50,000 to $200,000 at a time. The bills were loaded into duffel bags and luxury vehicles. Mercedes-Benz G-Class SUVs. Range Rovers. Escalades. The visual contrast was stark. Organizations claiming to serve impoverished communities while operators drove six-figure vehicles. Financial analysis identified 47 primary suspects. Site operators who submitted false meal counts. Consultants who created fake invoices. Non-profit directors who knowingly processed fraudulent claims. And Amy Bach, the central figure coordinating the enterprise. By late 2022, federal prosecutors had compiled sufficient evidence for indictments. The case would be one of the largest pandemic fraud prosecutions in American history. On January 20, 2023, arrest warrants were executed across Minnesota. The coordinated operation involved FBI, IRS criminal investigation, and U.S. Postal Inspection Service. Over 150 federal agents deployed to 12 locations simultaneously. The timing was deliberate. Pre-dawn raids minimize resistance and prevent evidence destruction. At 6 a.m., tactical teams approached target residences. Fog blanketed the Twin Cities, reducing visibility but not operational precision. At Amy Bach's lakefront property in Savage, Minnesota, agents secured the perimeter in darkness. The home sat on 2 acres with water access, purchased with funds traced directly to fraudulent reimbursements. Agents announced federal authority and demanded entry. When no response came, the door was breached. Inside, investigators found a residence filled with luxury goods. Designer clothing with price tags still attached. Handbags worth thousands of dollars each. But the critical discoveries were digital and documentary. Laptops containing spreadsheets tracking false meal counts and kickback payments. Encrypted messaging apps coordinating claims submission. Bank records showing the full scope of money movement. Handwritten ledgers detailing cash distributions to site operators. The evidence was overwhelming. Type yes if you want to see what happened at trial. Simultaneously, raids unfolded across St. Paul and Minneapolis. At the residence of Mukhtar Sharif, a site operator who claimed to serve meals at multiple Twin Cities locations, agents discovered evidence of international money laundering. Sharif had submitted claims totaling over $30 million. Investigations found no evidence meals were ever prepared or served. Instead, bank records showed wire transfers exceeding $8 million to accounts in Kenya and Turkey. Real estate purchase documents for properties in Nairobi. Investment records for commercial properties in Istanbul. The stolen funds had purchased tangible assets on 3 continents, far beyond the reach of easy recovery. By noon on January 20th, all 47 defendants were in federal custody. Some surrendered at their attorneys' offices. Others required tactical apprehension. Abdiaziz Farah was arrested at Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport attempting to board a Kenya Airways flight to Nairobi. In his possession, $100,000 in cash and encrypted phones containing communications explicitly discussing the fraud. "The state isn't checking if the kids are real," one message read. "Just make sure the paperwork adds up." The digital evidence removed any claim of innocent confusion about program requirements. U.S. Attorney Andrew Luger held a press conference that afternoon. These defendants exploited a program designed to feed hungry children during a national emergency. They stole over $250 million through false claims, fake invoices, and an elaborate network of shell companies. The scale and audacity of this fraud is breathtaking. The federal indictment detailed counts of wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Each wire fraud count carried potential sentences of up to 20 years. Many defendants faced dozens of counts. If convicted on all charges, several faced life imprisonment. The first trial began in April 2024. 7 defendants faced juries in Minneapolis federal court. The government's case was methodical and devastating. Prosecutors presented bank records tracing money from federal nutrition reimbursements through shell companies to personal accounts and international wire transfers. Surveillance footage showed cash withdrawals and luxury purchases. Expert witnesses testified that the meal counts claimed were physically impossible given the size and equipment of reported feeding sites. One location claimed to serve 2,000 hot meals daily from a storefront with no industrial kitchen, no storage capacity, and no delivery vehicles. Former employees testified about being paid to sign false attendance sheets for children who never existed. Defense attorneys argued their clients misunderstood complex federal regulations. that cultural and language barriers created confusion, that the government was selectively prosecuting Somali defendants while ignoring fraud in other communities. The jury was not persuaded. After 3 weeks of testimony and 6 hours of deliberation, verdicts were returned. Guilty on all counts. All 7 defendants convicted. The evidence had been too comprehensive, the paper trail too clear. This was not bureaucratic confusion. It was deliberate theft. Share this video so communities understand the depth of this corruption. But the scandal took a darker turn. In March 2024, allegations emerged that shook the prosecution. A juror from the first trial came forward with shocking claims. She reported that during deliberations, a woman claiming to be a defendant's relative had approached her outside the courthouse. The woman offered cash in exchange for a not guilty vote. When the juror refused, the woman allegedly showed her a bag containing $120,000 as proof of their seriousness. The juror immediately reported the attempted bribery to federal authorities. The revelation was stunning. Even facing overwhelming evidence and federal prosecution, defendants were attempting to corrupt the judicial process itself. Federal prosecutors filed superseding indictments charging 5 additional individuals with jury tampering and bribery. The new charges carried sentences of up to 10 years each. Investigators traced the bribery attempt to relatives and associates of defendants on trial. The audacity was remarkable. Rather than accepting accountability, the network was doubling down, attempting to buy verdicts. The jury tampering charges sent a message. The justice system would not be corrupted, even by those willing to spend hundreds of thousands attempting to obstruct it. Then came June 2024. Immigration and Customs Enforcement executed deportation orders for several convicted defendants who were not United States citizens. The removals were lawful consequences of federal felony convictions. Under immigration law, aggravated felonies make non-citizens deportable regardless of residency status. For defendants who had stolen millions from American taxpayers, deportation following incarceration was both expected and appropriate. But the response exposed deep political and community tensions. Outside the federal courthouse in Minneapolis, protests formed as ICE prepared to transport convicted fraudsters. Demonstrators blocked entrance roads, chanted slogans accusing federal agents of racism and targeting immigrant communities. The protests were organized rapidly, suggesting coordination and advanced planning. 4 hours, the gathering remained tense but non-violent. Then it escalated. Objects were thrown at ICE vehicles. Rocks. Bottles. Protesters attempted to block transport vans carrying convicted criminals. Federal officers in protective gear formed defensive lines. Chemical irritants were deployed to disperse crowds attempting to prevent lawful deportations. The confrontation lasted over 3 hours. 17 individuals were arrested for assaulting federal officers and obstructing government operations. ICE vehicles sustained damage. Windows shattered. Tires slashed. Several agents required medical treatment for injuries from thrown objects. The violence was captured on multiple cameras and broadcast nationally. The images were jarring. Federal law enforcement officers under physical attack while executing court-ordered deportations of individuals convicted of stealing $250 million from programs meant to feed children. If this shocked you, comment accountability below. Governor Tim Walz's response became a flashpoint. He issued a statement condemning violence but also expressing understanding for community frustration with aggressive federal immigration enforcement. The equivocation was criticized immediately. There was no aggressive enforcement. There was lawful deportation of convicted felons. Walz's statement suggested moral equivalency between stealing $250 million and holding perpetrators accountable. His administration had already failed to stop the fraud despite early warnings. Now, his response to violence against federal officers executing lawful orders suggested continued political calculation over principle. The context mattered. Minnesota under Walz had implemented policies limiting state cooperation with ICE. Sanctuary city designations. Restrictions on information sharing between state agencies and federal immigration authorities. The policies were framed as protecting immigrant communities. Critics argued they created environments where criminal networks could operate with reduced fear of immigration consequences. The Feeding Our Future case became a national symbol of how political considerations could enable fraud and then complicate accountability. By late 2024, over 30 defendants had been convicted either at trial or through guilty pleas. Sentences ranged from 5 years to 17 years in federal prison. Asset forfeiture efforts recovered approximately $70 million. Properties seized. Luxury vehicles auctioned. Bank accounts emptied. But the vast majority of the stolen $250 million was gone. Spent on personal luxuries. Transferred to foreign accounts beyond recovery jurisdiction. Invested in international real estate difficult to seize. The children the program was meant to serve would never benefit from those funds. The institutional damage was profound. Federal child nutrition programs implemented enhanced verification requirements nationwide. The changes slowed aid distribution and increased administrative burdens for legitimate organizations. Programs serving actual community needs faced increased scrutiny and delayed funding. The fraud had created systemic distrust. Every application now required verification that delayed meals reaching hungry children. The criminals had not just stolen money. They had poisoned the well for organizations doing genuine work. The political questions remained unanswered. How did Minnesota allow $250 million to be stolen despite early red flags? Why did Governor Walz's administration settle the discrimination lawsuit rather than defending program integrity? Why were no state officials disciplined for oversight failures that enabled the largest pandemic fraud in American history? The answers pointed to a political environment that prioritized avoiding accusations of discrimination over protecting taxpayer resources. That valued speed of distribution over verification of legitimacy. And that refused to acknowledge how identity politics could be weaponized to shield criminal conduct. This case exposed uncomfortable truths. That fraud can operate at massive scale when political leaders fear being called racist more than they fear enabling theft. That criminal networks understand how to exploit cultural sensitivities and bureaucratic vulnerabilities. That the consequences of prioritizing political optics over accountability are measured in hundreds of millions of dollars stolen from children. And that when justice finally arrives, some communities will frame it as persecution rather than accountability. The trials continue. More defendants await sentencing. Asset forfeiture efforts proceed through international cooperation channels. But the money will never be fully recovered. The trust will never be completely restored. And the political leaders whose failures enabled this historic fraud remain in office, largely unaccountable for their role in one of the most audacious thefts in American history. Comment your thoughts on who bears responsibility for allowing this to happen. This investigation should stand as a warning. Pandemic relief was necessary and saved millions from catastrophic harm. But the speed and scale of distribution created vulnerabilities that criminal networks exploited with historic success. The lesson is not that aid programs are inherently corrupt. It is that aid without verification becomes theft. That political considerations cannot override fiduciary duty. That accusations of discrimination cannot be allowed to paralyze legitimate oversight. And that leaders who fail to protect public resources must face consequences equal to those who steal them. The fight for accountability continues. Federal prosecutors remain committed to pursuing every defendant and recovering every possible dollar. But the broader fight is about something more fundamental. It is about whether America can provide aid to vulnerable populations while simultaneously protecting those programs from exploitation. Whether we can acknowledge that criminals come from every community without stigmatizing entire populations. And whether our political leaders have the courage to enforce accountability even when it is politically uncomfortable. Hit like if you believe corruption must be exposed regardless of political consequences. Subscribe to stay informed about cases that reveal how our institutions can be corrupted and how justice fights back. Share this documentary so communities understand the full truth about what happened in Minnesota. The children who went hungry while criminals bought mansions deserve that truth. The taxpayers who funded this theft deserve that truth. And the future of programs designed to help the most vulnerable depends on that truth being told without fear or favor. This is only the beginning. More fraud cases are being prosecuted. More accountability is coming. The question is whether we have the collective courage to demand it consistently, regardless of which communities are involved or which political leaders are implicated. Justice cannot be selective. Accountability cannot be negotiable, and the fight to protect programs meant for America's most vulnerable must continue with unwavering commitment. Stay vigilant. Stay informed. Demand answers. The integrity of our institutions depends on it.